Hello and welcome to Atomic Facepalm. I'm Bree, and today we're going to talk about Nier Automata. So I just finished Nier Automata. For Nier, that means multiple playthroughs. This is a game, and I know that's a bit of a spoiler, but it definitely is something that you need to know going into it. It's about a 25, 35 hour game, depending on, you could go longer, but anyways, 25, 35 hour game, but you're going to have to beat it at least 3 times. More than that, there's 26 total endings, but some of those are kind of trick endings or, silly little asides, but definitely 3 playthroughs. I will call out spoilers at the end. I definitely want to talk about spoiler stuff. This was a cool game with a really cool kind of story, and I think it's worth talking about and discussing. So there will be big spoiler tags. There'll be a link down below telling you the timestamp of when that's going to start. I'm going to come right out and say that I love this game. It's right up there. It definitely has an interesting story. It's a beautiful kind of take on something very familiar for the story. When you start off, you kind of have ideas about what this game is going to be about and how they're going to handle it, and then they kind of do some nice and interesting twists on it, and it definitely has a lot of feelings in it. It's a feelings game, at least for me. Some people might not give a shit, but I thought it was really, especially towards the end, a very sad game, maybe one of the sadder games. So for the story setting of this game, it's basically in the far future, aliens came and invaded Earth, and they brought with them a giant, massive army of machines, and they kind of forced humanity to flee to the moon. Humans made an army of androids to fight for them and kind of clear off the planet. This has been going on for, thousands of years, hundreds of years. You don't really get an idea, just a long time. So long that the world that you see, the maps that you go about, is just kind of apartment buildings that have, completely disintegrated until all they are is concrete, and it's kind of this wasteland. In this world, you are playing as an android, which I think if you've seen any shots of this, you kind of see she's like this Japanese doll girl with like a maid outfit, which looks a little ridiculous, high heels, giant swords. That's main character 2B. You play as her. She's a combat android, and then she has a sidekick, 9S, or 9s, or whatever. And he's more of a scanner combat android. Looks like a small schoolboy. So you play as these androids. It's not the sort of story that grabs you right out of the gate. There isn't a long intro exposition, and you kind of are thrown right into combat, which I think is a strong point. It shows you a little bit of everything that you're going to experience in the game, gameplay-wise, right from the start. I thought it was a gripping intro as far as, action and fighting giant. In the intro you fight like the most giantest monster ever. I think that's pretty cool. You definitely get a feel for the world right from the start, kind of this desolate landscape, abandoned buildings. There is wildlife, tons of, growth is happening again, and you kind of get the story by the androids' reactions to, what's going on around them. But these are combat androids, they're soldiers, so they listen first, they don't question orders. They're a little stiff, I'd say. That was one of the things that I didn't like right away, is the characters are a little stiff, especially 2B, the character that you play as from the start. She is kind of grumpy. I didn't like her in the beginning. I'd say in my first playthrough I was kind of like, meh. She's okay, she's cool. I really like the character herself. I think it's cool character design, and I think she fights like a badass. I think she's super awesome in that respect. While the characters are stiff from the start, I think as you start to understand them and understand what they've been through and, more about their backstory, because this is a kind of story that trickles in slowly over time, you definitely like them a lot more. By the end, you're very emotionally attached to them. So while they start off a little stiff, they are androids that do have feelings, but for some reason they think that they shouldn't use those feelings, or that's definitely like, we shouldn't get emotional. They say that a lot, like we're not supposed to have emotions. So it's kind of this strange thing where they're not supposed to have emotions, but they do. It's an open world game, sort of. It's a pretty large map, but since you are playing through multiple times, that world can feel a little bit smaller. There is some cool parts of it. There's a desert zone, and oddly enough they call it like desert zone, forest zone, but there's different areas, and they're kind of smashed together, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, but they're cool. I definitely give big props to the desert. You're like out there, and it's huge and open, and you just look out and you see desert for as long as you can go. and you can surf on the sand dunes. It was one of the moments where I was like, holy shit, I love this game. Because she is a very fluid character, and she slides and moves around, and then you get out into the desert, and then you're surfing along sand dunes, and it just is a good feeling. It feels good. It's very responsive gameplay, and that's fun. There are lots of secret areas in this game. It is a big, large, open map, but if you kind of duck behind things, there's lots of different treasure chests. There's a couple of secrets that I still haven't gotten. I know where they are, but I didn't figure out how to open them. I think that was interesting. I was always looking for those secrets. The problem is that there's kind of these invisible walls, and they don't really tell you where you can go and where you can't, so I'll see something up there, and I know that I can get up there somehow, and you kind of just gotta run around and slam yourself into an invisible wall. It'll look like a rock that you could maybe jump up onto. She can jump, because they're combat androids, not only are they really slidey and scoochy around, but they can jump, double jump, and slide through the air and zoom through the air, so you have this freedom with the ability of your character to move around and jump onto things, but then the environment itself kind of holds you back from that sometimes, which I'd say is definitely meh. I didn't care for that. At one point, there was a secret that I knew about, and I smashed myself into the walls like for so long that it started to kind of give me a headache or a woozy feeling, because you're kind of like jump, bam, jump, bam, jump, bam, and it was like, didn't make me feel good. So music, I'm not a game music person. Like, I know a lot of people buy, you can always buy a game soundtrack. This is probably one of the first games where I love the music so much that I listen to it at work. I could listen to it again. It's one that I would buy a soundtrack to. It is an amazing musical soundtrack. But then at the same time, it's ever evolving. So as you go through the game a little bit more, the songs change ever so slightly in a different way, and you get different twists on them. There's a part where, machines are speaking, and that eventually, they're speaking out loud, and it's kind of a cutscene thing, and then that fades into a song. Like I said before, you do play through this game multiple times, but while some things like the map seem repetitive, the actual story that you're playing, they kind of skip over, so it saves your side quest data. So if you did a side quest in the first playthrough, you don't have to do it in the second. And then you don't realize it in the first playthrough. You're kind of a group of androids, and you think you're together all the time, but there are times when you kind of go apart, and so you get those other perspectives, and then you also just understand what they're kind of going through, and this adds this nice little layer of a different thing, a different perspective on what's happened. You definitely get different information, so it's not like you're just playing through the same exact game again. It's a whole different kind of deal. At first I was kind of like, I don't know about this, and then I realized it was this really subtle way of not ramming a different story into your head. I feel like this is definitely a game about multiple perspectives. So let's talk a little bit about gameplay, and then I'll get into spoiler discussion. This is an action RPG that it combines with bullet hell, combines a little bit with some 2D, 3D, twin stick shooter stuff. I played the game on the PC. I'd say that this is a pretty bad port for a game like this. I feel like it deserved a lot better and deserved some love. So cutscenes have capped FPS, and that makes them look really janky and weird and not like they're playing well. They're kind of like flickery. Another thing is some of my settings kept resetting. My camera setting would just randomly reset, not every time I close the game, but sometimes when I close the game it would, and I always exit correctly, so I don't know. Another thing is my mouse cursor would pop up in the middle of the screen, on the edge of the screen, sometimes in like a really emotional cutscene, and I'm trying to record my gameplay so I can use it for the video, and then all of a sudden my, cursor's right in the middle, and they're talking, and it's a really emotional thing, but then my cursor's right here like, that was annoying. So a couple of those things, and I also had some issues with the controls in hacking. It didn't seem to work. That could be my controller, that could be my computer, but all in all, I'd say bad port, and maybe it's worth looking into if you haven't bought the game, playing it on the PS4 if that's available. So this is, first and foremost, an action RPG, and that, I think, is the strongest point. I mean, I love the story, and I love the music. I would say above and beyond all that, as soon as I got my hands onto 2B and you're slashing around and the way the combat happens, I was hooked. That for me was the number one thing that I loved. The combat was really fun and fluid. There's, instead of dodge rolling, you kind of glide out of the way, kind of a glide dodge, glide evade, I don't know. It's fun. So light and heavy attacks combined with each weapon's own kind of special attacks lead to these kind of amazing amount of combos that you can discover. It doesn't come right out and say that these are the combos, you kind of figure them out as you're fighting along. I didn't even understand that there was combos until I started 2B shoots up in the air and I've got a, guy up in the air and I can slam him back down, and I was like, oh, I can really do what I want to do, and it's very responsive to how your character, you move yourself. If you move left and you attack, she's going to do a very fluid animation and attack that way. The game is a 3D game, but in a lot of times it'll flip to a 2D perspective of a 3D world. You'll get to a certain section and you'll go down a hallway and all of a sudden the camera will rotate and lock into this 2D view until you get through that section and it unlocks and goes back to 3D. You're kind of fighting in a 2D space. All your attacks work the same way as they did during the 3D, area, except for you can't dodge forward and backward away from things. It also would then lock sometimes into a 2D top-down view, and that was a lot of times for when you're in your Gundam kind of suit and doing shooty fighter plane stuff. It was interesting. I see that they were trying to kind of mix up the gameplay. I don't know that it works in the end. I think that sometimes the bullet hell stuff drags it down a bit. I definitely think that the 2D to 3D bullet hell hacking stuff really added to the game the first playthrough, maybe even the second playthrough. By the third playthrough, those were the things that felt repetitive to me, those kind of sections, because they didn't feel hard, they didn't feel challenging. I played this game, I think, mostly on normal. I dipped into easy a little bit and I dipped into hard a little bit. I think it's interesting that you can do those changes on the fly. A lot of games, when you say, I want to be on normal difficulty, when you make that choice at the beginning, you don't understand what that means until you start playing, and then you're locked into it and you're like, well, I don't want to go back and reset my whole game. But this let you kind of dip your toe into hard or dip your toe into easy and see, is this the difficulty I want to play on. So this game is an action RPG and it has RPG elements, and I'd say that they really did a good job of making them part of the story or make sense. So you're as an android, and the way you upgrade your character is by installing little chips, and you kind of start off with your operating system chip, which if you want to install will hilariously kill your character because it makes sense. And then you kind of have different chips for your HUD, so your UI elements, like the little mini-map. If you don't want your mini-map, you can actually uninstall that chip and leave space for attack upgrades. There's a lot to be gained through these chip upgrades, and you can expand. At first you start with just a little bit of memory, and then with some money you can expand your memory and get more areas for chips. You can also upgrade your chips. You can combine them together to make better, stronger chips, but they also take up more space. So a stronger upgrade will take up more of your memory space, and so you kind of have to decide which skills you want and which you don't. Some of the chips are definitely felt required. Once I equipped them, I was like, I can't go back to not having this skill or this ability. One of the other elements that they add to the game, besides the bullet hell, the action RPG, melee combat, the RPG elements, and the 2D, 3D, is hacking. This, I think, is the weakest point of this game. I really didn't like the hacking. They kind of added in a little bit at the beginning, and it's an optional thing almost. And then towards the end of the game, there's a lot of hacking in some parts, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm really bad at it. It's kind of a twin stick shooter thing, which I'm terrible at anyways. And actually, I didn't understand that I could move with the other stick. I thought I was just moving with the one. And that was probably part of my problem. And then the controls weren't really great on my particular whatevers. Not my favorite part of the game. I'd say that's my biggest complaint, was the hacking portion. I really did love this game. Between the melee combat, which I felt was fluid and fun, between the music, which is beautiful and sad and kind of haunting, and between the story, which is extremely melancholy and sad and somewhat familiar, but a different take on some things. This is a world of endless war. You are artificial intelligence or artificial life fighting other artificial life in what seems like a never-ending war. It doesn't feel like anybody wins or loses. It's just a lot of death and sadness, but in a good way. I think I said that before, that I'm a feelings game kind of person. I like a game that does make me feel sad or happy or whatever. This definitely made me sad more than happy. It is depressing in some places, I think, but in a nice and interesting way. So go play the game. I'm not much more I can say without getting into spoilers, which I'm going to. Spoilers from here on out And once you play the game, come back. And if you did, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Comments below or message me on Twitter, any of those things. I think that we've come across this robot that wants to be a real boy story before, but when you see it in this game, it's definitely very different. When you start to come across machines that are behaving differently and trying to be humans, at first you're like, oh, that's kind of cute, and oh, good, they're nice, but then they start to really drive that home. There's a scene where you come across robots trying to procreate and to make life, and that sounds kind of funny and stupid, but then you see it and it's bizarre and unsettling and kind of sad. You see them just smashing against each other and, baby, life. They're trying to create life, and it's this almost like robots stuck in this weird loop. This is a story about what happens when you leave androids and machines in this vacuum and they have no one really, there's no humans and there's no aliens like everybody kind of has been thinking. There's no gods. And they kind of try to create a society out of nothing. And I think that's a really interesting take on it, of what they try to do. The machines obviously look to humans. The androids, too, actually look to humans for what they should be doing, how to find meaning, because at this point they've just been fighting for thousands of years. I think this is the first time where I really enjoyed the different takes on it. You play first as 2B, then as 9S, and then as 9S and A2, and definitely see the different sides of this war, and none of it feels good. I think that's why the game feels so sad in the third act, as you kind of realize that everybody's playing at war without any real reason. There's no reason for them to fight anymore. There is no humans, there are no aliens, and so they're fighting without gods. They're fighting without a reason. And they try to create gods, and they say that, point blank, there's a reason I'm using the word gods here, is, the machines look to death as, life has a beginning and an end, and both of these life forms, I guess you might want to call them life because they're starting to have emotions, or they're trying to, don't have an end. There isn't death. They are uploaded to the ship at different points. Their consciousness is uploaded, and that's kind of a save point for them. If they die after that upload, then they're created from that upload, and so they lose all those memories of what happened, and that happens right from the beginning. This idea that they don't have relief from this never-ending war is kind of a sad thing, and that's something that you don't really take into, even though it's the very first thing that she says to you, and even though that's the very first kind of section of the game deals with that, that doesn't hit home for you until the end, or the second or third playthrough, when you start to understand that they're stuck in this eternal Groundhog Day of just being at war with the machines, and vice versa. The machines are kind of that way too. When you finally get to talk to some of the nicer, like Pascal, the machines that have kind of disconnected themselves from the network and said, yeah, no, I'm done with this, they have a similar take where I've just watched my friends die and die and die and die, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, and it's just this never-ending hell for them. So that is kind of this main theme of this game. Like I said before, I didn't really care for 2B in the beginning, and I think that's intentional. You're not supposed to like her that much, and then you understand different perspectives or different reasons for why she is the way that she is. For 2B, you play her in the first act, and then you play 9S in the second act, and then in the third act you play her for just a small amount of time and you watch her die. One portion, and which is probably the most memorable thing I have ever done in a game, is her systems are corrupted and she's got this logic virus, and you walk her as she's dying, like her body is falling apart, her vision is going away from her, everything's shaking, she can't attack, none of her systems work, and you slowly walk her across the map to where she just gets murdered, and that's it, and you never play as 2B again, because at this point in the game there is no ship for them to upload to anymore. You understand at this particular moment in the game there's no humans, you know that there's no aliens, you know that their ship of androids, everybody just got a logic virus and was killed or is so corrupted that you can't do anything and all they want to do is kill you. So you are playing as one of the last of 3 androids on a world where there's no humans, there's nothing to fight for, and all there are endless amounts of machines that just want to kill you. Then you take her broken body and walk it across the map to where you lie down to die. And at this point all I wanted to do is play 2B again. I really enjoyed playing as her and fighting as her, and then you play as 9S. and then you play her for a minute, and then she dies, and then you get to play the rest of the game either as 9S or A2, who is very similar to 2B as a combat android, but isn't 2B. 9S at this point just wants her back. You see memories of her, and so the third act of this game is this heartbreakingly sad thing where all you want to do is play as 2B, or you want 2B to be alive. And she kind of isn't. I mean, they've kept her memory in a sword, and depending on which of the 3 endings you kind of choose for the last playthrough, there is multiple endings there, you can kind of get her back alive and everything's fine. But the other 2 choices, she's not. She's kind of in A2, but she isn't. But it's still, no matter any of those endings, are still feel sad. Like, at this point, everything is so awful that there isn't a good ending that can make me feel good. Like, yes, you can make A2 and 2B and 9S live. The fighter pods can bring those people back to life, but it isn't the same. Like, there just is, no matter which ending you choose, it's still pretty sad. One thing that happens when you open up the last portion of the game and you beat the game through the 3rd playthrough is you get save points, chapter selection, so you can go back and kind of experience those other endings. The 3 playthrough act really makes everything worthwhile to me. It finally gives you different perspective on the first playthrough when you watch 2B struggle with killing 9S. She's done this before. 9S is a combat android that has come to the same conclusion many times, and he's found out that there is no humans, and then 2B is the one that kills him. That's not something you find out until the end, and so when she's really harsh towards 9S in the beginning, you understand finally why. I think that's an interesting take on storytelling where that happens a lot. I'm not going to say that this is the most unique story ever, but I definitely liked it in a gameplay perspective, where you finish this game and suddenly it changes how you thought about the first 2 acts of it. That will stick with me, and I think it's really subtle. I don't think it's something that's like, this is this, and this is how you should feel about it. It's something that slowly is realized. I'm not sure how to explain it, but I felt different. It's something that slowly kind of builds up in you the emotion in this game, and I think that's interesting. We've definitely seen other stories where androids and machines or whatever try to become aware or develop feelings, whatever, become a little bit more than android or machine, and there's something about the way that this game does it in a weird way. Like, when you first come across the amusement park and they're all have clown outfits on and they're trying to be beautiful, or they're trying to be philosophers, it comes off as cute and childlike and somewhat sad, and you feel for them because they're trying to be something that they're not. And especially, I think the androids do have feelings. The machines try to. Some of them are starting to, but they don't all have feelings. So when they call another, robot or machine brother, sister, mother, daughter, whatever, they try to create these familiar bonds. They really can't, though. They can't. It's weird and bizarre and just heartbreaking. Anyways, as I said, I've gone on way too long. You guys know that I definitely like this game. I recommend it. I think it's an awesome game. So yeah, if you guys have comments, I'd love to hear you. You can follow me on Twitter and message me there, or leave a comment below. We always read those and I will comment. I definitely would love to discuss this game with anybody that's played it. So that's it for now. Good luck and have fun.